It is very early in the morning near Sao Paulo. The sky is still gray, the road is almost empty, and most people are still asleep. On the side of a quiet stretch of highway, 3 old, dirty suitcases are lying in the grass. They look like someone just threw them away in a hurry. A local person notices them. At first, it just looks like trash. Maybe someone dumped old clothes or stolen items. But the way the suitcases are placed feels strange, like they were dropped there in a rush and then forgotten. The police are called to check. When officers open the first suitcase, the smell is so strong that it answers their questions before they even see what is inside. They do not find drugs, money, or weapons. They find human remains. Inside the other suitcases, it is the same. A body has been cut into pieces and packed like unwanted baggage. News of the discovery spreads quickly through the police radio. A crime like this is not normal, even in a big city. Dismemberment suggests something personal, something full of anger or cold calculation. The police know right away this is not a simple robbery or a random killing. The investigators begin their work step by step. They collect the suitcases. They check the area for tire marks, footprints, any sign of who left them there. At the same time, forensic teams start trying to answer the most important questions. Who is this person and what happened to them? Within a short time, through fingerprints and other evidence, they find a name: Marcos Kitano Matsunaga. He's not just anyone. He's the heir to Yoki, a huge Brazilian food company whose products are in supermarkets and kitchens all over the country. Snacks, flour, grains, his family's brand is part of everyday life for millions of people. When this name reaches the media, the story explodes. Television stations break into their usual morning programs. Presenters, still in their polished studio clothes, now speak with tense faces. They tell viewers that a powerful businessman, a billionaire heir, has been found dead, his body cut up and left in suitcases beside a road like garbage. Commentators begin asking the obvious question in simple, shocked words. How does a man with everything, money, status, a beautiful family, end up like this? Very quickly, the story stops being just about a murder. It becomes a symbol, the dark side behind a perfect, rich life. Newspapers and websites dig up photos of Marcos in suits, smiling at events, standing next to his elegant blonde wife Elize, and holding their little daughter. The contrast is brutal. In one image, a happy family. In the other, 3 suitcases on the side of a highway. As journalists race to fill their articles with details, rumors start to move faster than facts. Some early reports suggest business enemies or a kidnapping gone wrong. Others hint at a secret life, at betrayal, at passion and revenge. But soon, quiet whispers begin to point in another direction. Police sources speaking off the record say there is no sign of a violent break-in at Marcos's home, no unknown enemies caught on security cameras. Instead, investigators are spending a lot of time looking at his personal life, especially inside the walls of his own luxury apartment. Reporters pick up on this and start planting a chilling idea in the public's mind. Maybe the person who knows what really happened is not a rival businessman, not a hired killer, not some unknown stranger on the street. Maybe the answer is much closer. Maybe the truth is sitting right there, inside the fairy tale home. Before people knew his name from headlines and crime shows, Marcos Kitano Matsunaga was simply seen as a success story. He was born into a Japanese-Brazilian family that already had money and a growing business. He went to good private schools and later studied business at a respected university, training for the future everyone assumed he would have, running the family company. That company was Yoki, a food brand started by his grandfather, Yoshizo Kitano. What began as a small family operation grew into a giant in Brazil. Over the years, Yoki came to sell hundreds of different products: flours, grains, popcorn, seasonings, snacks, and more. Its bags and boxes sat quietly on shelves in supermarkets all over the country. For many Brazilian families, Yoki was part of normal everyday life. When Marcos finished his studies, he stepped into the company as part of the leadership. He was seen as the natural heir, the next generation to carry the family name and the brand forward. Inside the company, employees saw him walking the factories and offices in a calm, controlled way. Outside, people described him as polite, soft-spoken, and reserved. Business magazines and news articles treated Yoki as a symbol of Brazilian growth. General Mills, a huge American food corporation, later agreed to buy Yoki in a very large deal. This purchase would greatly increase General Mills' sales in Latin America and showed just how valuable the Yoki empire had become. For Marcos, this meant his family brand was no longer just national. It was becoming part of a global giant. From the outside, his life looked almost perfect. He had a powerful position, a respected last name, and access to a lifestyle few people ever see. He enjoyed expensive wines and collected rare weapons. He went on hunting trips, took part in shooting activities, and moved in circles where luxury was normal. To his family, he was the serious but trusted son and grandson, the one expected to protect everything they had built. To the business world, he was a golden prince of the Brazilian food industry, the face of a brand that fed millions. At this stage of the story, there is no talk of Suitcases, no scandal on TV, no crime documentaries. There is only a successful businessman at the top of his game, standing on a mountain of snacks, flowers, and seasonings, completely unaware that one day the world would remember his name for something far darker than food. Before Elize became a name on headlines, she was a quiet girl in a small town that most people in Brazil have never heard of. She was born in a small city in the countryside of Paraná. Her family was poor. She was raised by a single mother who worked as a housemaid to keep them alive. There was no luxury, no special chances, just hard work and small salaries. Elize went to public schools, and according to people who knew her then, she was a good student and never caused trouble. As a child, she dreamed of leaving that small world. She wanted a better life in a big city, a place where there were more jobs, more money, and more possibilities. When she was about 18, she finally left. She moved to a bigger city to study. She enrolled in a technical nursing course and started working in a hospital. On paper, it was a sensible path, a stable profession, a chance to support herself without depending on anyone. But real life in the city was expensive. Rent, transport, food, books, everything cost more than she had expected. And a young nurse in training did not earn much. The dream of a safe, comfortable life still felt far away. At some point, Elize decided to change direction. She later moved again, this time to São Paulo, the largest and richest city in Brazil. There, she chose to work as a luxury escort, advertising her services on an online relationship site. Her clients were businessmen and wealthy men who could pay for expensive meetings. The money was far better than anything she had earned before. Between one appointment and another, she still carried her old dreams, to be rescued from that life, to find stability, to have a future where she didn't have to sell her time and her body. One day, one of these clients changed everything. Through the escort site, she met Marcos Caetano Matsunaga. At that time, he was already a rich executive at Yoki, and he was married to someone else. At first, he was just another client, but he was different from many others. Calm, polite, and quietly generous. Their meetings became regular. What started in hotel rooms slowly turned into something more serious. He began to treat her less like an hour of company and more like a partner in his private life. For about 3 years, Elize lived as his secret lover. They saw each other often, and he helped her financially. Little by little, she moved further away from her past in the countryside and closer to his world of comfort and status. Eventually, Marcos decided to leave his first wife. He separated, and later he married Elize. Their wedding had many guests and included both civil and religious ceremonies. It was a clear sign. The former escort from the countryside was now the official wife of a food industry heir. After the wedding, their life changed again. Elize moved into a luxury apartment in São Paulo. She had designer clothes, finer restaurants, private trips, and all the symbols of high society. They later had a daughter, and for a while, the picture looked perfect. Rich husband, beautiful wife, and a baby girl in a fancy home. On the outside, it was the full Cinderella story. From a tiny town to one of Brazil's biggest cities. From a nursing student with no money to a well-paid luxury escort. From escort to mistress to billionaire's wife in a penthouse. At dinners with friends and family, people sometimes joke that every fairy tale has a price. Whenever someone said that, Elize smiled politely. But inside, that sentence stayed with her, like a small warning that this dream life might one day ask for something in return. After the wedding and the move to the luxury apartment, Elize's life changes completely. On the surface, she has everything she once dreamed of: a rich husband, a big city, beautiful clothes, restaurants, trips, and a baby daughter. But inside the apartment, the balance of power is very clear. Marcos is the one with the name, the company, and the money. The business is in his family. The properties and investments are in his name. Elize has stopped working and now depends on him for almost everything. If she wants to buy something big, she has to ask. If she spends too much, there is a comment, a look, or a cold remark. Little by little, the relationship starts to feel less like a love story and more like a system with rules. There are prenuptial agreements and financial arrangements that make it clear. In a separation, he will be more protected than she is. Even though the law can still give some support, from Elize's point of view, the message is simple. Without him, your life gets much smaller. Arguments begin to circle around the same topics: money, respect, and Elize's past. When she questions his late nights or strange behavior, Marcos doesn't just defend himself. According to what later came out in reports and the Netflix documentary, he sometimes calls her crazy and uses her former life as an escort to insult her, as if her past cancels out her right to complain. Class tension sits quietly behind their words. Marcos comes from a traditional business family. Elize comes from poverty and from a world most of his relatives would never enter. When they fight, it is not just husband against wife. It is heir of a food empire against girl from the countryside who should be grateful. At one point, because of his cheating and the constant stress, Elize actually thinks about ending the marriage. She wants a divorce. She even imagines starting over alone, anything to escape the emotional pressure. But when she finds out she is pregnant, she changes her mind. She tells herself she can endure it for the sake of the child and for the stable family she always wanted and never had. From then on, the baby becomes the center of everything and also another tool in their power struggle. According to her defense later in court, Marcos at some point threatens that if she leaves him because of his affair, he will fight for full custody of their little daughter. He has money, lawyers, and a respected name. She has a past that can be used to paint her as unfit. The idea of losing her child terrifies her more than the idea of losing the penthouse or the rich life. The more insecure she feels, the more tightly she clings to the marriage. But at the same time, the less she trusts him. Every trip, every business dinner, every unexplained message becomes suspicious. Fights become routine. Elize reaches a point where she no longer believes his excuses. She wants the truth in front of her eyes, not just in his words. After many arguments about his possible affairs and him calling her crazy and attacking her past, she takes a step that turns their marriage into something that looks less like love and more like an investigation. She contacts a private detective and pays him to follow Marcos and record what he finds. She does not know it yet, but this decision to treat her own husband like a suspect will open a door that cannot be closed again. The moment that changes everything begins very quietly, with a file from the private investigator. Elize has been living for months with a knot in her stomach. She feels that Marcos is hiding something. His phone is often face down. His schedule looks strange, and there are unexplained trips and late nights. When she questions him, he gets angry and says she is paranoid, that she is imagining things because of her past. Tired of being called crazy, she hires a private investigator to follow him. The deal is simple. Follow Marcos. Record what he does. Bring back proof, Whatever the truth is, sometime later the investigator returns with photos and videos. In one of them, Marcos is clearly seen with another woman. He is not just walking next to her. He is affectionate, close, and at one point, he kisses her. It is not a quick greeting. It looks like a man comfortable with someone he has met many times before. For Elize, this is the moment when her fairy tale life cracks. She had always known that Marcos had cheated in the past. After all, he met her when he was still married to his first wife. But seeing him now doing the same thing again while she is at home caring for their daughter feels like a deep humiliation. It is not just betrayal. It is a message. You were once the other woman. Now someone else is taking your place. On the outside, nothing seems to change right away. In public, they still appear as the perfect couple, smiling in photos, going to family events, acting polite at business functions. People around them may feel some tension, but the image is maintained. No one wants a scandal, especially with a huge business deal happening in the background. Inside the apartment, however, the atmosphere becomes heavy. Every dinner becomes an interrogation. Elize wants answers. Who is the woman? How long has this been going on? Will he leave her like he left his first wife? Marcos avoids, deflects, or denies. According to what Elize later tells lawyers and the documentary, when she confronts him with the private investigator's proof, he sometimes changes the subject or reacts by attacking her instead, reminding her of her past as an escort, calling her unstable, saying she is overreacting. The fights are no longer about small things. They are about power and fear. At this stage, their daughter becomes the center of the worst threats. Elize later claims that, during arguments, Marcos says that if she dares to ask for a divorce or cause problems, he will use his money and influence to take the child away from her. He knows the law, he has strong lawyers, and he understands how her past can be used to paint her as an unfit mother in court. For Elize, this is the deepest cut. Losing the apartment, the status, and the rich life would be painful, but losing her daughter would be unbearable. The fear of this possibility starts to dominate her thoughts. At the same time, in the business world, something huge is happening. Yoki is in the process of being sold to General Mills, a global food giant. People in suits are talking about risk, liability, and protection. How to protect the brand, the assets, the family's money. In one more bitter twist, those same words begin to appear in their private arguments. Imagine a conversation where Marcos, frustrated and cold, uses that language with her, saying things like, "I have to protect myself. This marriage has become a risk," or implying that she, with her past and her jealousy, is now a problem he needs to manage. For a woman who already feels like she was chosen and then placed into a life that doesn't fully accept her, hearing her own husband treat her like a liability is like being pushed out of her own story. By the end of this topic, 3 things are clear in Elize's world. Her husband has another woman. Her place in the marriage and in the rich family feels weaker than ever. The one thing she loves most, her daughter, is now a weapon that can be used against her. The affair is not just betrayal. It is a mirror, showing her how easily she could be replaced, erased, and left with nothing. It is May 2012. On the business side, life looks very good for Marcos. The sale of Yoki to General Mills is moving forward. People are talking about a huge amount of money, a once-in-a-lifetime deal for the family. For Marcos, it is the peak of his career. For Elize, however, it is a time of fear. She feels more replaceable than ever, and she believes that if he leaves her now, he will be even more powerful and harder to fight. In their apartment in São Paulo, the tension has been growing for days. The private investigator has already shown Elize proof of Marcos's affair. Fights have become more frequent and more intense. She feels humiliated and cornered. He, according to her later version, wants to control the damage, keep his image clean, and move on with his life. On the night of the killing, everything that has been boiling under the surface finally overflows. Marcos comes home. There is the usual routine on the outside. food, small talk, the normal things couples do when they are trying to act fine. But underneath, both know the subject they are avoiding, the other woman, the divorce that might come, and the future of their daughter. At some point, they start arguing again. This time, it is not a small disagreement. Voices rise. Old accusations come back. His betrayal, her past, the threats about custody, the fear of being thrown away after the yoki sale. Both sides later give different details about what happened in those final minutes, but they agree on one basic fact. Inside that apartment, during that argument, a gun was present and a single shot was fired into Marcos's head. According to what Elize later tells the court and the documentary, she says he slapped her or attacked her first, and that she reacted in a moment of fear and desperation, grabbing the gun and firing. According to the prosecution, the situation is very different. They argue that she knew where the gun was, waited for the right moment, and shot him in a deliberate, planned way. What cannot be changed is the result. Marcos falls and he is dead. In many stories, this would be the point where panic sets in, someone calls an ambulance or the police, and the tragedy is immediately exposed. But here, the story takes a darker turn. Instead of calling anyone, Elize stays in the apartment with his body. In that silence, she makes a decision that will shock the entire country when it becomes public. She will not report the death. She will try to hide it. She has some medical knowledge from her earlier nursing course. She understands bodies, anatomy, and what happens after death. Slowly, the situation in her mind changes from, "My husband is dead," to, "I need to get rid of his body and erase what happened." From this moment, love, marriage, and even anger seem to disappear behind something colder: method. She prepares to do something very few people can even imagine doing. She starts to turn the man she once called the love of her life into something she can move, pack, and throw away. The fairy tale does not just end on this night. It twists into something else, something closer to a horror story built from fear, rage, and the belief, true or not, that this is the only way she can escape losing everything. By the time the night is over, the argument is finished forever. There is no more shouting, no more threats about divorce or custody. There is only a body on the floor and a woman planning what to do with it. After the shot, there is no going back. Marcos is dead on the floor of the apartment, and Elize is alone with a reality she cannot undo. From this point on, everything becomes about one goal in her mind: making the body disappear. Because of her nursing training, she is not completely unfamiliar with anatomy and death. But what she chooses to do next is far beyond anything she learned in a classroom. Over the next hours, she moves from shock into a kind of cold, focused state. She decides that instead of calling the police, she will cut up his body and get rid of it, piece by piece. This part of the story is very dark, so we can keep it simple and non-graphic. She dismembers his body in the apartment. She places the parts into plastic bags to control the mess and the smell. Then she packs those bags into suitcases and other containers she can carry. Each step turns her husband from a person into something she can transport. It is a brutal kind of organization, like she is turning a human life into luggage. But she still has a big problem. How do you take several heavy suitcases full of a body out of a luxury building without anyone noticing? Here, the building's elevator becomes part of the crime. Late at night or in the early hours, when most neighbors are sleeping, Elize starts moving the suitcases. One by one, she loads them, rolls them out of the apartment, and takes them down using the elevator. On the security cameras, it looks like a woman doing late-night trips with luggage. There is no sign of panic, no one screaming, no one stopping her. The doorman sees nothing obviously wrong. After all, people move bags in and out of buildings all the time. These trips continue until all of Marcos's remains have been moved from the apartment into her car, waiting in the garage. The same building that once kept them safe as a rich family now quietly helps hide what has happened, simply by functioning as normal. Doors opening, elevator going up and down, cameras recording everything without speaking. When she finishes loading the car, she drives out of the city. She chooses a road on the edge of São Paulo, not a crowded central area. There, away from the polished image of their apartment and their social life, she stops and leaves the suitcases by the side of the road. In her mind, the highway and nature around it will swallow the evidence. Maybe animals, weather, and time will destroy what is inside. Maybe no one will ever know whose body was there. She gets back into the car and returns to the city, to the same apartment where her daughter sleeps, and tries to act like life is normal. For a short time, it seems her plan might work. Marcos is missing, and there is no body in the home. She can pretend he is away, or that she doesn't know where he is. But the world outside does not follow her script. Within days, local people find the abandoned suitcases. The smell and the weight make it clear that something is very wrong. The police are called, the suitcases are opened, and the horrible truth comes out. Inside are the cut-up remains of a man. Very quickly, this is no longer just a hidden family tragedy. It becomes a national crime story. The same suitcases that Elize hoped would remove Marcos from her life, instead bring his name to every TV screen and newspaper in Brazil. Somewhere in São Paulo, Elize sees the news reports. She hears the same words everyone else hears: a dismembered body found in suitcases on the side of a highway. She knows exactly whose body it is and exactly who put it there. What she doesn't know yet is that the same silent witnesses that helped her, the building's security cameras and the elevator records, will soon become the key to proving what she did step by step. Once the suitcases are found and identified, the case stops being a mystery body and becomes the Marcos Matsunaga case. From that moment, the police are not just looking for who did it. They are carefully examining every part of Marcos and Elize's life, almost like checking a company's accounts line by line. The first big step is identifying the body. Through fingerprints and other forensic methods, they confirm that the remains belong to Marcos Kitano Matsunaga, the Yoki heir who has suddenly disappeared from his normal life. Now the story of a missing businessman turns into the story of a murdered one. From there, the investigation turns toward the person who shared his home, Elize. Police begin to build a picture using many small details. Phone records, who called whom, at what time, and from where. Text messages and emails, arguments, affection, threats, and plans hidden in everyday words. GPS and car data, signs that a vehicle left the building and traveled toward the area where the suitcases were dumped. Security camera footage, especially from the apartment building. Elize using the elevator, moving suitcases, and going to the garage late at night. Each piece on its own might not be enough, but together they start to show a pattern that matches the timeline of Marcos's death and the disposal of his body. At the same time, the police talk to family members, friends, employees, and neighbors. Step by step, a picture of the marriage appears. Frequent arguments, jealousy, betrayal, talk of divorce, and fear about the custody of their daughter. People describe shouting, tension, and a relationship that is far from the perfect couple seen in photos. For the investigators, the relationship itself becomes a kind of crime scene. They treat the marriage like a set of financial accounts that need to be audited. Where are the lies? Where are the secrets? Which parts don't add up? Soon, the evidence points strongly toward Elize. She was with him in the apartment. She had access to the gun. She appears on camera, moving suitcases around the time he vanished. She has no solid explanation for certain gaps in time and strange actions after his disappearance. Eventually, the pressure becomes too much. When she is questioned in more depth, Elize confesses. She admits 3 main things. She shot Marcos in the apartment. She dismembered his body. She disposed of the body parts in suitcases on the roadside. However, she does not accept the idea that this was a cold, business-like plan. She insists it was a crime of passion. In her version, she says there was a violent argument. She claims he insulted and threatened her, including threats about taking their daughter away. She says she felt desperate and acted in a sudden moment of fear and anger when she fired the gun. Afterwards, in shock and panic, she says she did not know what to do, and her decision to cut up and hide the body came from terror and confusion, not from careful planning. The prosecutors strongly disagree. Looking at the same facts, they tell a very different story. They point out that she knew how to handle a body because of her medical training. They highlight that she bought or prepared some items before the crime, which could suggest planning rather than panic. They emphasize the cleanup, the careful use of suitcases, the late-night elevator trips, and the choice of a remote dumping area as signs of method and control, not blind emotion. In their eyes, this is not a sudden explosion, but a planned solution to a problem. A husband who was cheating again. A man who might leave her once the yoki sale was done. A powerful person who could use money and lawyers to limit her access to their daughter and their shared lifestyle. They argue that she saw all of this coming and decided to act first, removing him from the picture and trying to erase the evidence. So by the end of this stage, there are two stories built from the same set of facts. Elize's story: I was abused, humiliated, and afraid. I lost control in a moment of anger and fear. Everything after that was a desperate attempt to hide what I had done, not something I calmly planned beforehand. The prosecution's story: she was intelligent, informed, and prepared. She knew about the sale, about her weak position in a possible divorce, and about his affair. She calmly organized his death and disposal, like someone handling a difficult problem. The job of the investigators is mostly done. They have a body, a confession, and a pile of evidence. The audit of this marriage has produced two very different narratives built on the same numbers and facts. The next step is to take all of this into the courtroom, where a jury will have to decide which story they believe, and most importantly, why this killing happened. By the time the case reaches court, Brazil already knows the basic facts. Marcos is dead. His body was cut up and left in suitcases, and Elize admits she was the one who killed him and disposed of his body. What the trial in 2016 must decide is not if she did it, but why she did it and how it should be judged under the law. The courtroom becomes a kind of public stage where two very different stories about the same woman and the same marriage are told. The prosecution's version. For the prosecutors, Elize is not a desperate wife who lost control. They describe her as intelligent and educated, with medical or nursing training. Fully aware of Marcos's money, the value of the yoki sale, and her weaker position in a divorce. Capable of planning and carrying out a complex crime, shooting him, cutting up the body, packing it into suitcases, and dumping it far from home. They argue that she knew about his new affair. She feared being left with less money and possibly weaker rights over their daughter. She decided to act first, killing him on purpose, then cleaning up the scene and hiding the body in a cold, organized way. To them, this is not a sudden emotional explosion. It is closer to a planned execution, followed by a careful cover-up. The defense's version. For the defense, Elize is presented very differently. A woman from a poor background who rose into a world where she never fully felt accepted. Someone who suffered emotional abuse, humiliation about her past as an escort, and threats that she could lose her daughter. A wife who discovered yet another betrayal and felt she had no control over her own life. They say that on the night of the crime, there was a serious argument. Marcos insulted and threatened her once again. She grabbed the gun and shot him in a moment of fear and desperation, without planning it in advance. According to this side, what happened after the shooting, the dismemberment and the suitcases, was the act of a person in shock and panic, terrified of prison and of losing her daughter, not the actions of a cold killer calmly carrying out a plan. Witnesses as shareholders in the story. During the trial, many people speak. Members of Marcos's family talk about him as a provider, a father, and a victim who did not deserve what happened. People close to Elize talk about her fear of being left, about the power difference in the relationship, and about the threats she said he made regarding custody of their child. Each witness seems to take a side, like shareholders in different versions of the truth. One version, Marcos as mainly a loving man who made mistakes but was brutally killed. Another version, Marcos as a controlling husband who pushed Elize to the emotional edge. The jury watches, listens, and tries to decide which story fits best with the physical evidence and the timeline of events. The verdict and the sentence. In the end, the court does not accept the idea that this was just a simple crime of passion. Elize is found guilty of qualified homicide, a more serious category suggesting aggravating factors, and concealment or desecration of a corpse. She receives a sentence of about 19 years in prison in total. Legally, the system has spoken. She killed him. The way she killed and disposed of him is considered especially serious. She must spend many years in prison for it. The doubts that don't go away. Even with the verdict, not everyone is satisfied. Some people believe the sentence is fair and see her as a calculating killer who tried to erase a man's existence. Others believe she is partly a victim too, of class difference, emotional abuse, and a power imbalance, and that the court did not fully understand her side. So when the judge reads out the sentence, it closes the legal process, but not the public debate. By the time the trial ends, one chapter of the story is over. The state has decided how to punish Elize, but another chapter is just beginning, the long battle over how the story will be told, remembered, and reshaped in the years to come. Years pass after the trial. Marcos is gone, the court case is over, and life in Brazil seems to move on. But in a quiet, everyday way, his presence is still around. In supermarkets across the country, Yoki products stay on the shelves. Popcorn, grains, seasonings, snacks. The brand does not disappear with his death. Instead, it becomes part of something even bigger. In 2012, General Mills completes its purchase of Yoki, folding the family company into a global food giant and using it to grow its business in Latin America. For customers pushing their carts, Yoki is just another familiar logo. Most people grabbing a bag of popcorn have no idea or do not think about the man whose last name once stood behind it, or the way his life ended in 3 suitcases on the side of a road. While the brand finds a new home in a multinational company, Elize finds hers behind prison walls. After being sentenced to nearly 20 years, her punishment is later adjusted because she confessed and worked while in prison. She remains in a women's penitentiary in Sao Paulo with a release date still far in the future. Their daughter grows up far away from both parents in the care of Marcos's family. She was only a baby when the crime happened. By the time her mother is expected to leave prison, the girl will be an adult, carrying a story she did not choose. Then, years later, a new chapter opens, not in court, but on screens. Netflix releases a Brazilian true crime docuseries, Elize Matsunaga, Once Upon a Crime. It attracts attention because it features Elize's first in-depth interview from prison. In the series, she tells her life story in her own voice. Her poor childhood and difficult family background. Her move to the city and work as an escort. Meeting Marcos, becoming his mistress, then his wife. The fights, the betrayal, the threats she says he made. The night of the killing and what she says she felt and feared. The title, Once Upon a Crime, is not an accident. It plays with the idea of a fairy tale gone wrong. Once upon a time, a poor girl met a rich man and entered a castle made of money and food brands. Then, instead of a happy ending, the story ends with a murder, a dismembered body, and a prison sentence. For some viewers, the documentary feels like a chance to understand the human side behind the headlines. They see a woman talking about trauma, violence, fear, and regret, and they wonder if the court was too harsh or if parts of her story were ignored. For others, the series feels like a new layer of spin. Critics note that the show leans into the sensational aspects of the case and in many moments allows Elize to shape the narrative strongly in her favor. They argue that the documentary focuses more on the emotional and dramatic parts than on a complete balanced analysis of all the facts and legal details. In this final phase of the story, something important becomes clear. The court has already decided her legal guilt, but the public is still deciding what to think about her as a person. Interviews, articles, YouTube videos, podcasts, and social media threads keep retelling the story in slightly different ways, sometimes focusing on Marcos as the victim, sometimes on Elize as a symbol of domestic violence and inequality, and sometimes simply using the shocking details to attract clicks and views. By the time your own video about this case ends, the biggest twist is not a hidden piece of evidence or a surprise witness. The real twist is this. The story of Marcos and Elize no longer belongs only to their families or to the court. It has become content, something to stream, to discuss, to judge from a distance. A man's life and death. A woman's crime and punishment. A child growing up without either parent? All of this is turned into episodes, thumbnails, titles, and recommendations on a screen. The final horror is not just what happened that night in the apartment or on the side of the highway with 3 suitcases. It is how easily a real tragedy can be broken into chapters, simplified into a fairy tale gone wrong, and served to millions as entertainment, only to be replaced when the next shocking story arrives.